a nation of immigrants, obviously, and what we don't often know, or maybe some of you know, that even in Connecticut, there's a 3.6 million approximate population of Connecticut, but there are in that population people born in another country, not counting people from Puerto Rico. There's a little over 600,000 people born in another country. In eastern Connecticut, there's approximately 32,000 people born in another country. Well, another interesting fact is that on average, approximately 7% of Americans, native-born Americans, will go into business at some point in their life. In the immigrant community, that number jumps to 28%. They're here to be successful. They didn't come here to fail. So that's one of the reasons why the Chamber opened up a small division called our Immigrant Resource Center. It's a center to help immigrants who are interested in going into business. We've had a fair amount of quiet success helping people. A lot of these immigrants don't want to be up front or out in public, and so we trust and acknowledge their desire to be somewhat private about going into business and so on. But if you think about it, think about where you go to eat. Right, Ty? I was there last night. Great restaurant. Actually, several great restaurants. But the point is that they're here to succeed, not fail. And that's why we have such a great success rate with the immigrants. So to start the program off, I'd like to introduce Len Wolman, who really needs no introduction, himself an immigrant, who came here a number of years ago and is now a very successful businessman. So Len is going to lead the group in a discussion, and we'll allow some time at the end for questions and answers. Len, thank you so much for being here and for helping me.
So the video Amanda showed us almost leads directly into this, because I think the other thing that Tony didn't mention is that each one of us could have chosen to live anywhere in the US when we got the opportunity to come here, and yet we've chosen Eastern Connecticut, and we've all been incredibly fortunate and honored and privileged to live in the US versus where we were born and grew up, because in my personal view, this is the best country in the world by far, and everyone has every opportunity to do whatever they want in this country if they're just willing to work hard and establish themselves, and the panel here is truly proof of that. And it's also great to see some young people sitting up here versus Tony and I. So our panel is about diversity, and before I introduce each of the panelists, I thought I would go to our best source, either Siri or Google, and just Google what diversity is. And what Google told me diversity is it means understanding that each individual is unique, recognizing our individual differences. These can be along the dimensions of race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, social economic status, age, physical abilities, religious beliefs, political beliefs, or other ideologies. And we'll talk more about that in a couple of minutes. It is truly an honor to be on this panel with some incredible individuals. I want to start by introducing Ornet Hines, who is Assistant Vice President and Branch Manager for Liberty Bank. She is a 2017 graduate of Connecticut School of Finance and Management and holds a master's degree in business administration from Ellis University, an associate and bachelor's degree from Johnson & Wales. She immigrated from Jamaica in 2002 and has over 13 years of experience in the banking industry. In her spare time, Ornet is a volunteer with New London Homeless Hospitality Centre, the Martin House, Thames River Program, and Young Professionals of Eastern Connecticut. Tayo, who also goes by the name Tai. I didn't try and pronounce Sapawan, which I hope is right, because I didn't want to mess it up. He's the owner of local restaurants, including Thai Sawasdee, the Spice Club, Pink Basil, and Samurai Noodle Bar and Grill. Thai comes from a family of 9 siblings in the town of Nakhon Ratchasima in eastern Thailand. She graduated with a BA in accounting from Bangkok University and started her career as an accountant at Muang Thai Insurance. After moving to the US, she found her calling as a chef and entrepreneur, opening Thai Sawasdee in 2007, and built upon her success by opening 3 more restaurants over the next 10 years, bringing more authentic, diverse Asian cuisine to our region. Sunil Bhatia is Professor and Chair of Human Development Department at Connecticut College, where he has taught since 1999. He holds a BA and an MA from the University of Pune in India, and his Master's in Education and PhD from Clark University. He specializes in understanding the development of self and identity within the context of racism, migration, globalization, and formation of transnational diasporas. Bhatia has published more than 40 articles and book chapters on issues related to transportation, migration, identity and cultural psychology. He's an associate editor of the Journal of Theoretical and Philosophical Psychology and serves on the editorial board of Qualitative Psychology and Human History of Psychology. David Preka is the owner and founder of Advanced Group, formerly known as Advanced Improvements. He came to the US to make something big, and at the age of 20 he started his own company, which has since grown to be a leading award-winning general contractor in southeastern Connecticut. He employs over 45 people with a focus on superior customer service and dedicated community outreach. Currently, David is president of the Home Builders and Remodelers Association of Eastern Connecticut and a member of the Town of Groton's Economic Development Commission. He also is a board member of the Eugenio Noodle Theatre Center. Some impressive backgrounds and individuals that we're fortunate to have here in our community. Before we start with a few questions, I thought it might be interesting to tell everyone just a quick story on where we each started our careers when we came to the US. I'll begin that. So I had graduated from hotel school after growing up in Johannesburg, or 60 miles out of Johannesburg on a farm in South Africa. And I did not see a great future there. I hoped to come to the US, and I came here and I got my first job working as a food service supervisor just down the street in Groton at which was then a Holiday Inn, it became a Quality Inn, and I think now it may be a Motel 6 on Bridge Street down in Groton. So I have been incredibly fortunate to have the life and career I've had here. I want to then turn it over to Tony, and he can talk about where he started.
I wasn't expecting that question, but anyway. I came here, and my first job was at Lawrence Memorial Hospital as a painter's helper. And I'm not sure why I was a helper. I did as much painting as the guy that was supposed to be giving me some direction.
Good morning, everyone. As a graduate from high school, I decided to come to the United States with no painting or doing anything to that nature, just seeing an opportunity here. So we got all the talent in here.
My history might be slightly different because I came as an international student with a scholarship, but I didn't have a stipend, which means I had to make a living. So I started off in Worcester right away in the first week with 3 jobs. One as a library assistant to the library, and that was a fancy title for basically shelving books on the 4th floor. Textbook, a bookstore shop, where I would basically load, unload textbooks, and the third was at a pharmacy store selling newspapers.
Good morning, everyone. I came here, my first job is the babysit, and then I pick up some side job for server, and the reason I came here is after I graduated college and I worked in the company for 3 years, and I feel like I want to escape myself to learn something in the world. So I'm so glad I came here.
Good morning, everyone. So like Sunil, I came here as an international student. I started at Johnson Wales University. My first job was a student assistant, breaking down tables, polishing glass. I hated polishing silverware. Oh boy. And then I moved up to a teaching assistant, which is like a night audit job. So here I was working overnight too, and I have classes in the morning. But that's where I started at in Rhode Island.
I think the other thing we probably all have in common as well is that I know when I got that first job and got an opportunity to work 110 hours a week and make 125 bucks a week, I was probably the happiest guy in the world. So let me start with some questions. I define what Google told us diversity is. Maybe Ornet, we could start with you and then just go down the panel. How would you personally define diversity? Why is a diverse workforce essential to the overall success of our business community?
So for me, diversity goes beyond just a number. It's a circle of togetherness, powered by differences, but it's differences beyond just race and gender. For me, it's thoughts, it's ideas, it's perspectives and skills. Having people who are different, Stephen Covey says that strength lies in differences, not in similarities. And once you truly embrace that, you'll be surprised how all those differences that are inherent, that are deeper, comes together to just be really impactful to an employer or to an organization.
The diversity is important for my business, because without the diversity, I would not be success and be here. And just the way of people come from different background and different culture, and the ethnic culture, and the way of they live their life, and
I think diversity is really critical and crucial as a term vocabulary which entered sort of our consciousness in the 1990s through multiculturalism. And it's important to start out with diversity because it represents numbers, it represents difference, as was said before. But I think I prefer the term equity more than diversity, because equity is really about fairness. It's about inclusion. So if diversity asks the question, how do we bring diverse people, diverse individuals who are maybe migrants, who are of different racial backgrounds, that doesn't necessarily guarantee some kind of belongingness unless you have some principle of fairness. So to me, diversity sometimes is really about otherness and not so much about how does the so-called majority, to a certain extent, maintain its perpetual majority. So you have to kind of flip the question to a certain extent if you really want to be serious about diversity. So to me, diversity is asking questions about how do I change or bring about institutional transformation, societal transformation, whether it's in businesses, healthcare, education, in almost all spheres of life. So diversity is safe choice, but it's not a charity, it's not a philanthropy. It really means, to a certain extent, being very critically reflexive about how do you go from diversity to inclusion to integration as such. So to me, when you move from diversity to those other steps, you actually start thinking about sharing capital, sharing power. So whether it's asking questions about not so much whether do we have women in the boardroom or women in businesses, what is the structures that we've created that prevent women from coming into the businesses? What is the structure that we have created that does not allow immigrants or does not allow individuals who are racially different to share power? So that's important for me to think about as a starting point, but we need to make more brave choices, I think.
Diversity. Google what diversity means. 3 pages later, still didn't get it. To me, it means unique, different. Without diversity, the world can operate in one way. So, to me, diversity, it is different. We all think in a certain way. Diversity is unique. The way it's presented. Diversity means difference in so many ways. So, simple, sweet, and short is just different to me and unique.
It's difficult to put into a few words the complexity that surrounds the whole concept of diversity. It would take a long time for me to explain what I believe, but I will try with this. It's always puzzling to me why we have to struggle with this effort to diverse our boardrooms, our social interactions. When I came over here first, one of my wonderful contacts was in an Italian family, and they would serve up these incredible meals of meatballs and spaghetti. I never had it before. Well, you know, I would not have had it for years living in Ireland, and eventually Ireland modernized and became a pretty international country. But the whole concept of diversity is something we all should be embracing for the personal and fun and creative and just learning about other cultures. I mean, all immigrants struggle with this issue themselves because, you know, they come here, they have one foot in one culture and another foot in their own home culture. And so they're constantly trying to balance that out. And it's not until you have kids that come along you begin to realize that they educate you. My 2 grandsons, believe it or not, Rocco Sheridan and Luca Sheridan, live, well, only in America. I mean, you know, that's America. But they're minorities in the schools they go, in the excellent schools they attend in New York City. And there's never a question. So it's really, the question of diversity is really, really important for all of us to struggle with in our own ways, because we all bring certain experiences to the table. We all come from different diverse backgrounds. But my experience is, and I hope will continue to be, that every person of difference that I run into, I learn something. I'm delighted for the opportunity. And when you think about the fact that we have 32,000 people from another country living here amongst us, and that's a lot of people that's out of 250,000 approximate population for this area. So it's really important to understand the concept of diversity and to make it yours. Grow it as you and your experience allows you to do so.
So Ty, maybe we could start with you. Can you describe a great obstacle you faced in your career, how you overcame it, and what did you really learn from that experience?
For me, is number one is my language. I have the problem with the communication, and number two is the culture. Because I came from the country, the woman is not a leader for our country. It's not acceptable, and it's all about everything is the man in our culture. And I'm glad I came here. Everything is open, so you can do whatever you want. So I start to learn English and learn how to communicate with others. Sometimes people don't understand me, so I just have to try harder. And with the culture, I just try to learn from my employee to understand about your culture. When we work together, how can I make them happy, and adjust myself, adjust my attitude.
Thank you. Ornet, you want to give us...
Sorry. So when I first got here, I was really homesick. I never knew what winter was like in Jamaica. When you have winter and you say you're cold, it's like 6 to 8 or 70 degrees. So we got sweaters, from family members that travel back and forth. But coming here September 2002, it was also a high time because 9/11 had just happened a year ago. And it took me a while to really get over. I mean, waking up to go to school in snow and just adjusting. So my first year, I was sick all the time, and that was like a big obstacle for me because I was never sick. And so I understand what it's like to, people say your body goes through or adjusts to a different environment, and I certainly had to do that. That was like my first obstacle, just being away from home by myself. I grew up in a big family as well. My parents had 7 of us, so being away from home with no family around and you're in a country by yourself, that was a big obstacle for me. But you knew why you came. You knew the commitment, you know what you wanted to achieve, so you keep going. The nurses and I got really familiar with each other because I'm always there. But yeah, that was one of my biggest obstacles coming here.
Thank you. Just a little anecdote. So I have never been out of South Africa. The first time I got in a plane to go overseas was to come here. And I was all excited and landed at Kennedy Airport, and it was in December, and there was snow all over, but it was warm, it was beautiful. I had no coat, and I walk outside. I'd never experienced anything like that in my life. Shows how ignorant I was. Tony, you want to give us...
Well, as many of you know, that I'm going to deviate a little bit from the question, but I got engaged in government, and as an immigrant, I was highly honored to be elected first selectman in Waterford and remained there for 10 years. But it's the reason why I got involved in government that's probably more important than why I feel particularly proud of this country. As Len said and others, if you focus on what you want, you can get there. But you're going to pay a price. It's going to require a lot of hard work. It's going to require being focused. And you're not going to do it on 40 hours a week. I can guarantee you that. So I'm sorry, I lost track of the question a little bit, but I want to tell the story. But my experience in government was started at actually Lawrence Memorial Hospital. I got this job with a fellow, Joe Serrato was his name, and he was from Italy, but he was here for a long, long time, and he was well respected in the community. And prior to getting that job, I was doing a little bit of painting on the side. The Niles Hill Road Garden Apartments, if some of you may know them. The fellow that built them was a fellow by the name of Mel Jetmore. I'm sure some of you will remember that name. But he had hired a painting contractor, and I worked there for 6 weeks on and off painting. As the rooms got ready, I'd paint the room out. And then the painting contractor took off without paying me. So it was my first experience when I went to the hospital. George Serrato, I told the story, and George Serrato says, "Come on with me, I'm bringing you down." Now the old Labour Exchange in New London is no longer there. It used to be on Bank Street. And George went in, and he was a little short, stout man, and he demanded to see the manager and told my story to the manager. And I thought, well, nothing is ever going to happen about it. But about 6 weeks later, I got a check in the mail. And that was my first belief that actually government can work and does work if you know how to use it. And so I will always remember that, because George was very instrumental in sort of helping me get settled in the community and believing in the community. Because like Ornet, you come here, I came from one of 8, and you're lonely, you're the only person here from the family. You miss out on your birthdays, the christening, the marriages, and all of the fun family things you miss out on. So you you pay a significant price for being here and for trying to be successful. And I don't know other speakers here, but I came from a very dysfunctional family. So my goal was to get away and have my own life and make my own mark in the world. So anyway, sorry, I'm rambling all over the place, but that's what it is.
David? Speaking 5 languages, and English is the most broken English language, I meant. Coming to the States was the biggest obstacle was that I spoke European English, like England English. And coming to hear real English here, it's like, oh my God, what they're saying. And normal to me was, and Len, you can vouch for that, it's like, how do you do? And the next morning, I woke up in this country, I get out of the door and I see the neighbor on my left, and he says, hey. I had no idea what to tell him hey means, so I roll in and I said, what hey means? I was like, well, in a nice way, good morning. So I wanted to go back and say hey back to him, but ran out. But the next morning I beat him up and says, hey. So kind of getting to that was like, it was a cold, it was just shocking to hear that it's the same sense and same words, but in a different accent. So I really had to get to that between, learning the proper way, and the accent was really like a lot of hard work to me to really get used to it. So that was the biggest thing that I really had to, the biggest obstacle that I really had to get situated, I understand now. So, and later, I mean, a couple years ago, I went to England. Oh my God, I couldn't understand a single word of what they were saying. So, it just, I think it's natural, but maybe it's me.
I think the only thing I can add to and elaborate on what Tony said, I think the first thing coming here, you realize that actually the first few months or years, you're here, but you're not here. You're in many both spaces, culturally, in your mind, psychologically too. And so when I came, there was no internet, there was no texting, there was no phone as such. So it was $20 cents to call for a 1-minute call to India. I remember how much I would spend calling, so I would write a lot of letters. So my letters were like a diary almost, I would come. And it almost sounds prehistoric now, writing that kind of letter, especially when I talk to my students, So I think that's one way to think about what happens when you come here, is that your mind is still there, your body is still there, there's a cultural lag. And you miss out on all the developments that are so-called happening back home, and then you're struggling to find yourself here, your footing here, and you suddenly realize that you're by yourself, that you have to do everything in terms of moving and shaking the systems and creating a niche for yourself. Now that can be a struggle for many millions of immigrants. And the second thing I think has to do with what David said, and that has to do with understanding the cultural rituals, practices, traditions. So for me, first of all, coming from India, when you walk down the street, actually nobody says hi, they just look past you. And there isn't a culture of saying, unless they know you. But if they know you and they ask you a question, how are you, they're very sincere. Whereas here, it's a politeness code. So when students would stop me, how are you, I would begin to pour my heart out. Okay, now that you asked me, let's go have a cup of coffee. There is no moving around this. So to me, learning these, what I would call implicit systems and rituals, is part of, I would say, acculturating within the larger context of the US kind of system. And then also knowing very subtle ways in which our society here works, the codes for what is success or what is valued. And that is equally important, because you definitely see also a clash of values, what you believe in, what you came in, what you were raised with. So thinking about issues such as love or marriage or justice. And when you come here, they have a very different concept of all this means. There's not sort of some kind of shared universal understanding. Navigating is what I will use the word, or negotiating these different worlds that you come from. And to me that inbuilt within that, and I think all immigrants would go through that, is a tension, essentially. You never actually get over it. Because if you ask the question, most immigrants, when do you stop being an immigrant? It's amazing, Tony still talks about home. I mean, he's still an immigrant in that sense. So it's not that the longer you stay here, somehow the less immigrant you become or less attached to your place. In some cases, it's actually the opposite. Your mind is always there. You can never take out the home from where you came or your very formative years when you spent your time. And that is complicated, which means you can never be fully present here. And that's an obstacle, I would say, or a challenge, but you can even use it to a certain extent for your mobility or for your commitment, as Tony said, to your community, to your life, and so on.
So I came from an incredibly close family. I didn't want to get away from my family, but I wanted to come to the US for an opportunity, because I just saw such a great future. And you see movies, you see stories. I mean, everyone looks to the US kind of growing up as the best country in the world to go to, and it is. But the things that people spoke about are, probably the homesickness is the hardest thing one has to overcome. And when you think about it today, you can't think about it in today's context or today's terms. Because when Tony and I came, You know, you couldn't afford a telephone call. It was incredibly expensive, and so you could only call occasionally. Growing up, I used to talk to my dad at least once, if not 2 or 3 times a day. So you couldn't talk for weeks or months. There was no FaceTime. There was no internet. It really was a completely different time. And I think the critical point that Tony made is that, you know, immigrants don't fail. Part of the reason they don't fail is because failure is not an option. And that's just a reality. You are going to succeed. Does that mean you have setbacks, that you have little failures? You do. But long term, you're never going to give up, and you are going to be successful at whatever you've set out as a goal to both live in this country and to succeed. And to succeed primarily because you want to make sure that your family and your children don't have to go through the same thing you did, and that they have a better life, a better opportunity, and a better future, that they don't have to deal with some of the things you dealt with growing up. So, Sunil, if we could ask you, what is the most rewarding part of your current role or your community activities?
I'll answer that question in a minute, but I wanted to follow up just a comment to what you said about success and what Tony you said. The only thing I would add is that while immigrants, there is no room to fail, but I'm an academic and I've been studying immigration and identity for the last 25 years, 30 years. There is, I think for business, given that this is a business context, I think it's important for leaders to also understand that while immigrants do give everything they have and there is no safety net, it's sometimes a one-way street. There is no kind of exit. Once you're here, you don't really go back because you've left your roots, so to speak. And that creates a tremendous amount of stress and toxicity in their life too. So if you look at all the health outcomes for immigrants there is a disparity between so-called mainstream, say, white folks or folks who are immigrants on issues of simple things like blood pressure, obesity, access to education, access to health. So while some immigrants do make it, no doubt about it, but there are quite a large ones too, and I don't want to paint a rosy picture somehow that somehow they all succeed. There are ways in which they also undertake or experience a kind of, I would say, loss and pain which they have to endure. And there are no systems as such in place to find ways to provide some kind of, I would say, reduce their stress or give them access to those resources that would make their life in some ways much more stable. So I wanted to kind of mention that, and to then come back to the question of my role. I'm a teacher, I'm a professor, and I love my job. I've been teaching. I don't discount human experience. So when I experience what I experience as a migrant, the good, the bad, the ugly, I decided to write about it. I decided to research about it. So for me, the personal was my political. So when I've written 2 books or 40 papers, it did not start from an abstract idea of what diversity is. It really started from the heart of what it meant to be a lonely undergraduate student coming to the United States and experiencing everything, all its forms. So I've had the incredible opportunity to give voice in some ways and have the privilege of being able to take my experiences and transform it into something very important and valuable that's consumed and read by my students. So the space that I'm in brings about what I call generational shifts. I'm able to speak and teach to students and so on, so I really relish that role. My second role is more about a community back home in India, and I have started a non-profit organization in my town where I grew up, where a large number of individuals don't have access to sanitation, almost close to 40% of it. We know this by the problem that's called open defecation, meaning there is no running water or there are no access to toilets. So about 10, 12 years ago, I started an organization here at Connecticut College. Some of the individuals in this room were on this committee. And that has become a very successful organization. We have been able to build close to about 2,000 different toilets, provide sanitation to individuals who need it. I've included students in it. My faculty have gone and visited these areas to bring about social transformation as well. And so I will kind of only point to how the role that project plays in my life, but there are many other community engagements that I take in New London too, as well as on campus as well. And those who are interested to hear more about it, I can speak later, but I'll stop at this point.
Do you want to follow on that, and maybe also if each of you could tell us whether you had a mentor?
Part of rewarding is being part of the community. It's like, first of all, in my opinion, was you had to be in the community to understand the community, and that is the biggest reward that really have to be part of it. And not only that, but it is such a blessing to have that community everywhere around you go, and you know, like you see individuals that reach out to you for help or whatever the case may be, and there's no hesitation whether you asking or you being asked. And that's the biggest part of the rewards you get, that we have so many friends that, and a lot of friends that reach out to you for help in the community and all that. That's, to me, it is a rewarding, because you know you've done something right for the community, and community is very important in my eyes. So as far as mentor goes, yeah, I had a mentor, plenty of mistakes. That was his name and last name. So, no mentor. First of all, stubborn enough to think that at a young age, because I came just under 18 in the country, so I thought I knew all. But no mentor was very, and if I had to do this again, I would definitely ask for a lot of opinions, and mentoring was such a big factor, because you know you would avoid a lot of you know, problems down the road. But that was no mentors.
Well, I'm afraid I had several mentors that over my career, and quite frankly, they were very, very important to me. I thought I knew how to speak English, but most people seem to not understand me. But I had a very heavy Irish accent at the time. I came over when I was 19, and October the 10th, 1964. I'm dating myself. And probably the woman that sponsored me on Ocean Avenue, her name was Peg Sullivan, was really a gift, because I had arrived and I really was raw. I mean, this is the best word I can come up with. I just didn't know anything about anything. And my first goal was to get a car. And I was fortunate that I got a job close by the house where we lived, and that really was helpful to get me started. But probably Peg Sullivan was my greatest mentor. She was a special needs teacher at the now closed Edgerton School in New London. And probably the next, and probably I should say the most important mentor I have, is my wife. I was very lucky that I met this young girl at Connecticut College, and quite frankly, she's still my mentor. So, I mean, I couldn't have done it without mentors. And there were many, many others, including Len Wolman. He and I chat a lot about various challenges that we both face. And I find that the most important advice that I could give to a young person today is, you know, find some good, honest mentors, somebody you can share your thoughts and soul with, and hear another side of the story. I don't think you ever, I think that need is always there, at least it is with me. I still talk with people I admire and appreciate and respect, and get some advice from. So anyway.
So, yes, you grow up in life and you find that you do have mentors along the way. Some are personal, some are professional. My mom was my biggest mentor, and when you can cherish a memory and hear her voice every day and ask, oh, what would she do or what would she say, you know, that still lives with you. But from a professional standpoint, so when I started my career at Bank of America, I come from a country where you can be candid. You say what you mean, and it's just a matter of clearing the air. So that way, if you're not being ambiguous, you say it, and then you see how people receive it, and then you can talk about it. So one of my mentors is in this room today, and she kind of helped shape my leadership, Lisa McNulty. She was my manager at Bank of America, and just someone who supports you and see that, you know, what qualities you have and someone to push you to get to the next level, even when you don't recognize it. And I also do have a peer mentor, Chrissy, she's in the room. You need a sounding board. You need someone to be able to just talk, be yourself. You could be stupid with and just say what's on your mind, and then, you know, just say it out loud and hear it. So I thank you both for being in my life, and thank you for being supportive and also telling me like it is when I need to be like, yeah, you need to hear it that you're not being good. So thank you.
For me, my mentor is my mother, and I learned how to do the business from her. She's the mother of 9 kids, and she have her own business. She paid for all her kids to college. She give us such a good life that I never can forget. And she very tough woman. She's work hard, and she's a good mother, and she's a good boss for her employee. I learned that from her.
So one last question, and then if we could have an answer on this, and then we'll take some questions from the floor. So to each of you, if you could give us one message to our audience and our community, and that is, what can employers or supervisors do to better foster an atmosphere of inclusion and equity?
The industry that I am in is ever changing, but not just in the banking. If you take workplaces around the world, it's evolving, and not from just a technological aspect, but also human composition. We change every day, and you know, a lot of times employers hire a minority because of a number or to make a book look good, and that's just not how it should be. You want to embrace diversity, you want to embrace differences. I feel that, you know, it starts from the top down, and if you can do that, you'll have an edge on the competition for sure. You'll also be able to bring, we talked earlier about diversity, and you have people who think analytically, and then you have people who think creatively. And a lot of times you put all the same people in the same room and nothing happens, and you keep just doing that, and I always like, why? So I would encourage employers to embrace diversity beyond just race and ethnicity, like I talked about earlier, skills, thoughts, perspective, and ideas, and you'll be surprised how I feel it builds a richer culture environmentally, not just in the workplace, but also in home life, when you try to get a balance between home life and work. So my recommendations or encouragement would be to truly understand diversity, not from a number perspective, but almost like a state of mind. That, you know, it's part of us, this is what we do, this is what makes us unique and different, but also we can come together with those differences.
I think I would just echo your thoughts on that, and sort of say the diversity is really not about individuals. While there is ideological diversity, there's diversity of race, sexuality, bodies, disabilities. They're really abstract. I think in order to really understand what diversity is, it's complex, but yet it has to be felt. So you need what I would say is institutional change, you need cultural change, right? Diversity is not only for those people who think or are diverse or look diverse. So those who don't usually consider themselves diverse are also part of the diversity. So men are part, even though when you think of gender, the first thing comes in mind is women. If you think about sexuality, the first thing comes in mind is what it means to be gay and lesbian. No, it's everyone has a gender, everyone has a race. So if you think about diversity in terms of blackness or say Asian Americanness, you also have to think about it in terms of whiteness. And if you think about that in that way, then you don't contain diversity. We tend to approach it using a containment metaphor. That all of these people around here are not diverse, but this particular group is diverse, so they need to change. Unless that principle flips and changes, you're not going to see institutional change, structures, businesses. So one of the questions I would think about to ask business leaders who are here or who are bankers is not ask so much what we can do for immigrants to succeed and give their businesses, ask the question, what is that mainstream businesses do that makes them successful? And then extend the same principles to all the other groups.
I'm going to relay this quick question to a small story. About 2.5 years ago, most of you guys know Ken Edward Jr. He was a police officer for many years, worked with FBI and so on. Received a phone call in the afternoon, look, Dave, I need some help from you. It's like, what is that? He said that I have a young guy who has been clean for the past 3-4 years, but he's having a tough time finding a job with his record and so on. So I said, well, knowing Ken lived across the street from his father, I said, Ken, no problem. Let's meet and let me, meet the young guy. And we met, and he was very talented, very kosher, very upfront. And I said, you know what? Everybody deserves a chance. So I said, this is what we're going to do. Without knowing you very well, I'm going to start my shop, organizing and and doing things around. So and then we can go to the next step. So he was very thrilled and happy. So everybody involved. And when can you start? A week later. So that was about Monday, give or take. So that Monday morning, expecting him at 7 o'clock. Well, he reached a different destination. His end destination, unfortunately. But what I'm trying to say with that is that an opportunity to embrace, diversity in many levels. It is not about race or sexuality or any of that, but it's just in general. So more like that was just a quick story to the answer.
So we have 5 minutes left. If there are any questions that we need to answer, we're happy to. I didn't mean to cut you off, Tony, but maybe you can add something at the end. Anyone have a question?
I think all of you have shown great courage leaving the security of your homelands to come to the United States. Was there ever a time in your lives here when you regretted coming here and thought about going back home?
I'm going to start that. Yes, Bill. playing golf with you and I have no idea what the hell I'm doing. Yes, that's no regrets, no such thing. I think it's just a great opportunity, great life. You know, it's the best country in the world, so no regrets. We're not talking about golf, but.
So for me, no regrets, but I did go back and live in South Africa a couple times. Once because of circumstances where I went back on vacation, and a week after I got back, my dad died, and I was the oldest, and my sisters and brother were still at school, and I had to help my mother. I came back, and then another period after I became an American citizen, we thought our parents were getting older, and Robert and I decided we wanted to go back there and spend some time with them. But there was never any intent of ever going back to live there. We always were committed and always were going to come and live in the US. It's an incredible country. We're all incredibly fortunate, and unless you have the perspective of living somewhere else, I don't know that you can really truly appreciate how fortunate we truly are. And I don't think that our kids can appreciate it in the same way that any of us can. I mean, Tony relayed the story about his grandchildren. You know, and we spoke about various topics here and different cultures that we grew up in, whether it was gender, expectations, chauvinism, class distinction or class restrictions. In this country, you don't have any of that. I mean, it's really up to you as an individual, and there's complete, it's a complete melting pot. There's opportunity for everyone, and it's what you want to choose, both from a personal and professional standpoint, in terms of where you want to go, how you want to live, and what you want to achieve. And I think as each generation passes on, we get further from where our roots were. But I think that the other thing you heard is you're born in a certain place. There is an attachment that is, you know, almost impossible to let go, particularly if you still have family living there. And obviously, we all have family that have been buried in the countries where we were born and grew up. So I think that it's been a very interesting morning. We had an incredible group of people that have spoken about it. But I think that we really need to thank Tony and Amanda for what they do with the Chamber. You see what Tony's accomplished with his life, what he's given back to the community. And you look at each one of these individuals, and there are many of these stories, both here in this room and around this country, that have really made the country what it is. For me, when I came on a tourist visa, I had to prove to immigration that I wasn't going to take a job away from an American. And fortunately, I was able to prove that in a very complicated, sophisticated, and challenging way. And I feel the greatest gratitude when I think of all the jobs we've been involved in helping to create and the opportunities we've given to people, and we've been able to experience from those people living here, working here, and being a part of the community. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Len, and thank you for really for all of what you do. I mean, the number of jobs this man has created, in not only in this state, but throughout the Eastern Seaboard and beyond, is amazing. And we all owe him a great debt of gratitude. So, look, it's obviously a very, very complicated subject. We're kind of in a bad spot at the moment in terms of national attitudes about immigrants in general. And what we need to do is to expand this conversation, to go beyond what we've just heard here today. I think I'm speaking for everyone here. We're all absolutely honored to be part of this country, to be part of this community. And all of these people here are really striving to make life better, not just for themselves, but for everybody around them, everyone they're associated with. I think Sunil was a professor at Connecticut College, if I remember correctly. Her name was Ruby Morris, and she coined the phrase, the great melting pot. But I'm sure you'll check that out and tell me if I'm wrong. Please do. But it is a great melting pot. I mean, that's what this country is. It's a great melting pot. And the reason, one of the main reasons that it's such a successful country is that we have all of the talent from all over the world coming here and have come here over generations to be successful, to make this country successful. So please spread the word, expand the conversation, and we go forward from here. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here.